And today we'll be discussing the ROC, the Riverway, and Central Library's Rundell Terrace Revitalization Project. This major capital project will include a complete renovation of infrastructure, large-scale public art, site-specific historical information, and community gathering spaces. In support of the project, FFRPL funded artist stipends for the finalists, helped promote the library's focus groups, and is helping to secure additional funding for select educational and artistic components of the project. Our presenter today is Bree Harrison, Finance Director for the Rochester Public Library and Monroe County Library System. Please help me join me in welcoming Bree to the podium.
Thank you, Susan. Hi, everyone. Even though the worst of the weather is not here yet, I still want to say thank you for coming out because it is cold, even for Rochester, and I'm very grateful. I'm also very grateful to the Friends and Foundation. This Tuesday Topics series has really focused on library programs, library initiatives, and library partners, and we're very grateful for that. It's a great highlight of all the things that RPL does, and it's more than you think. Had to get that one in there. So today we are going to talk about ROC the Riverway and the Rundell Library Terrace Project. And when I think about ROC the Riverway, when I talk about it with some friends and colleagues, the first thing that always comes out is, how did we get to ROC the Riverway so quickly? It just kind of appeared out of nowhere, these projects, these initiatives, and there was more of a background behind ROC the Riverway than just the governor's big announcement about a couple months ago. So I do want to highlight that there was several initiatives that really led to ROC the Riverway. The first being the Rose Fellowship. The National League of Cities, of which Rochester is a member, and the Urban Land Institute. Urban Land Institute is a planning and land design organization nationally. National League of Cities is an advocacy organization. They jointly sponsor a Daniel Rose Fellowship. This fellowship is a competitive application process which allows for municipal design, civic, economic development leaders to come together and support a city with analysis and technical support to address questions that may be plaguing a city for design initiatives or other areas. So in 2016, Rochester was one of 4 cities that was a recipient of the Rose Fellowship, and about 12 experts descended on the city for almost a year-long process. And the charge that the individuals have was to see how Rochester could activate and revitalize the downtown Genesee River corridor. They did a number of interviews. They came to Rochester and spent time walking through the city in different temperatures, different weather, and they really spent time with the public and with several city, county, other municipal leaders to really determine how we could look at Rochester in a different way. And they had a series of recommendations. And I would encourage you, if you do a search for Rose Fellowship Rochester, the City of Rochester's website has the full presentation from the Rose Fellows. And it's a good read, and I would recommend it. But their primary recommendations were to really activate Main Street through retail, through public events, through looking at zoning in different ways. To review the city's current downtown enhancement district, which has historically been in place since our Skyway. It's a special zoning, a special tax program that really provides enhancements to any businesses and anyone along the old Skyway corridor. So it includes things like flower plantings, extra streetscape maintenance, and it's provided by the city. And it needs a review. It's time to update that given the changes to our downtown core. And the last recommendation they had was really to focus on finding ways to connect public spaces along the river. They highlighted the fact that Rochester is very unique in that the majority of our spaces are owned by the public that are actual riverfront property. And not all cities at riverfront have that. Many have barriers of private development that really prevents public access to the river. It's a resource, and we've turned our back on it for many years. So that was one spark that came about during 2016. And the second is the city's local waterfront revitalization program, or what you may hear of as LWRP. This is a planning tool primarily. It's a planning tool that is about 280 pages long. Again, it's also on the city's website. It's a little dense, but it is also a good read for anyone who is really interested. It was first adopted by the city in 1990. And LWRP is really a municipal tool to address waterfront issues. So the city's LWRP looks at the Genesee River, but it also looks at Lake Ontario. And it recommends goals, initiatives, projects, issues that they will work through over the next several years to try and promote economic development, environmental remediation, and other initiatives that are addressed by the city. This document is filed with the state, and it actually helps us to be competitive for grant applications. During the last update, which was done from 2017 to 2018, there was really more of a focus on the riverfront now that the project at the Lake Ontario Port and Marina has been winding down. So the 2018 update really spent time focusing on initiatives that were part of the catalyst from the Rose Fellowship. And the LWRP for 2018 included 54 projects. These projects were prioritized, but they really were the basis for a discussion. When founding the LWRP, the city started to have initiatives and talks with the governor's office and with the Department of State to figure out how we could leverage the LWRP and the Rose Fellowship momentum and make something happen that's a catalyst for funding. So those two initiatives really were a basis for the development of the ROC the Riverway concept. ROC the Riverway was a formal announcement by the governor with $50 million from the New York State Upstate Revitalization Initiative, or URI funding. You may hear it called from time to time. This was announced about a year ago, in February 18. While the state announced this $50 million initial seed funding for these waterfront initiatives, they were very cognizant of the fact that while the LWRP is a public document, not all of these projects have been fully vetted through the public in a normal feedback process that really was expansive and included a lot of downtown stakeholders. So they did charge a 12-person advisory board. That board included members of different regional initiatives, different downtown stakeholders, artists. It included city representatives, but it was a very broad coalition of members, and they were charged to take the first phase of this URI funding, this $50 million, and to recommend plans that had been developed by the city, to take that 54-part project that had been scaled down to look just at the waterfront, which when the city did the concept of the ROC the Riverway plan initially, I believe there were 28 initial projects. And they really had to recommend what would be done with $50 million as matching for the first phase. They focused on the first 6 miles of riverfront around the downtown core, which again is kind of that area that the Rose Fellows really looked at. It's just between the University of Rochester, just past Genesee Valley Park, to the south, through downtown, and ending at the north by High Falls. So this 12-member advisory board, they had a number of charges, right? This is a difficult process to work through, but their statement said they focused on 4 goals that really helped with the project selection process. And that was to make sure that the investments were focused along the river corridor to create dynamic public spaces, that these investments done by the state and by the city would spur private development and job growth, that would also still not necessarily create entirely new infrastructure, but recognize that there is current infrastructure that needs repair and needs investment, and also to conserve and maintain just the wonder and natural resource that is the Genesee River. So just for perspective, and again, I would encourage anyone who is curious, the city has a very detailed ROC the Riverway website that provides a lot of visual information that is easy to navigate, that shows all of the detail surrounding the ROC the Riverway investments and what areas they're looking at. But the primary focus, again, for this time around was primarily downtown, so the orange circle, which really, if you were to look, here is the Broad Street corridor. Here is that's the Main Street corridor, sorry, and then Broad Street being over here, and High Falls being in the blue circle. They really focused the investment in a narrow band for this first $50 million. And the recommendations, actually I'll go back to this slide just to give some examples. The $50 million projects, I'm going to list them because I can never remember them all, but the projects in terms of the announcements of the state funding for the first phase of ROC the Riverway was $20 million for a renovation of Charles Carroll Plaza and Genesee Crossroads Park. which is just past if anyone has walked across the Sister Cities Bridge between the Andrews Street Bridge and the Main Street Bridge, past the old First Federal building and the rotating, that section by the Holiday Inn, that is Charles Carroll Plaza. And also includes some repairs to the underlying parking garage that supports the plaza above. $6 million for a river terrace and improvements to Blue Cross Arena. $5 million to improve a river terrace that already exists and other improvements to the Floriano Convention Center. $4.5 million committed to the Broad Street Aqueduct project. This included completing some Genesee Riverway trail segments that would connect Court and East Main Streets for the trail. $4 million for structural repairs to the Pont de Rennes Bridge, and $1 million for trail improvements in High Falls. So Pont de Rennes is the beautiful blue bridge over the High Falls district. $2 million to improve the eastern riverfront and trail south of Interstate 490. $1.5 million for the Rundle Terrace revitalization project. $1.25 million for a riverfront promenade on the west side of the river between Andrew Street and the Inner Loop, former Front Street. $1 million as a contribution for a skate park that will be over here beneath the, beneath the Interstate 490 bridge, the Freddie Sue Bridge. $500,000 for a running track bridge, which is a future river crossing opportunity in the Northeast. $250,000 to help complete fundraising activities of Cornhill Navigation. So they will have a new boat that will serve the South River corridor. And the remaining $3 million of that $50 million investment is part of what was recommended by the Rose Fellowship. It is seed money of $3 million for a downtown riverfront management entity, something that will actually be responsible for programming, potential maintenance, advocacy, and events for the downtown riverfront corridor. So that's a lot. And I would say that the announcements made by the mayor and by the governor have a very ambitious timeline to complete those projects. Several of those projects were already part of the city's capital planning process. So several were already underway. And that actually does include the Rundle Library Terrace. But what else is underway right now? The convention center was really the first project to officially have a shovel in the ground. Their terrace construction project began this past fall, and they are anticipating to have it be completed by this upcoming fall 19. The Rundle Library Terrace project design is nearly complete. We are estimating that we will go out to bid for construction next month. The skate park project is also nearing completion in design. Their current schedule is calling for a bid in March 2019, so in another couple of months. And this image that you see below here is the Charles Carroll Plaza design. The design is near completion, but we do not have a final schedule for bid and construction as of yet. So again, just for perspective, this is the start of the Sister Cities Bridge. This is the Holiday Inn, and this plaza here is actually the top part of the Genesee Crossroads Garage, for perspective. So that's just the background for ROC the Riverway. What I really did want to focus on today is the project related to the library building, and that is the Rundle Library Terrace reconstruction project. This includes two components for us. It includes the North Terrace, which includes the frontage to the river and runs along Broad Street. It also includes the east sidewalk. If anyone has entered Rundle building through our main entrance, which is on the east sidewalk along South Avenue, everybody knows the condition of that is kind of rough. But what you may not know is both the east sidewalk and the North Terrace are elevated above South Avenue. When the library was built, it was built over both former Subway and also the Johnson Seymour Mill Race. So the majority of the Rundle building is actually cantilevered and platformed over those areas. Because of that, the primary impetus for this project, while it will create a civic plaza, is actually a structural rehabilitation project. The project overall, as a $7.1 million construction estimate right now, the majority of it you're not going to see because it's going to be the replacement and repair of the beams, girders, and structures to support the terrace building itself. And this image over here on our right was a summer image of the Rundle North Terrace if you were standing on Broad Street crossing the bridge towards South Avenue. Right now, as you've seen if you were coming in, that current area is closed off by fencing. It's closed off by fencing because the area is actually structurally unsound enough that it cannot take additional load beyond the terrace. So that was really a priority and an initiative the city would have undertaken, we believe, regardless of whether or not ROC the Riverway was coming forth or not. Having said that, this allowed us to do enhancements to the North Terrace and East Terrace sidewalks that we would not have been able to accomplish without this funding. This is an image that was provided to us by Bayer Landscape Architecture and Labella Associates. They are the current project designers for the Rundle North Terrace and East Terrace project. I'm going to go through some details for us because I know it's kind of hard to see how they have everything marked off right now. So the biggest change overall that you will see to the project is this segment here. This will be a cantilever deck that is going to open up what we are calling a river theater or a viewing terrace that will allow an additional 20 to 25 feet beyond the current limits of the terrace to be able to sit, eat, spend time, enjoy the different seasons of the river. The terrace will have two what are called seating and overlook areas. This one here and this here are actually both granite style seating and also an approximately 4-foot wide porthole that is strategically placed to allow us to see some of the areas of the former aqueduct and former subway construction below. It is our intent to backlight them at night, so there will be some context to how this site was formerly not only just the start of the Erie Canal Aqueduct, but also the start of the subway terrace or subway platform itself. For those of you who've been on the terrace in the last several years, you'll know that the area itself, while very expansive, is primarily just concrete decking. So one big push by the library and by the designers is to add more landscaping. These sections here show that we're going to have additional seating and also landscaping with substantial tree plantings to provide some shade and cover in all seasons. We're going to have new concrete throughout, but we're also going to have, as an homage to the original subway terrace, inscribed in bands, granite bands, that actually follow the former pathway that the subway would take before you would come through. So if you see the bands that are coming through here, that is the former pathway that the architects have charted on how the subway used to pass its way through Broad Street on its way out. The seating areas will be both stonework and also part of the landscaping, but the intention is that there'll be ample seating for gathering, for lunches, for individuals who are coming just to enjoy gathering downtown. One thing I do want to show before I talk about the public art as well is that the library will be replacing sidewalks here, mostly in kind, but we are replacing the bus shelter. Has anyone used the bus shelter as of late? It is well past its time to replace the bus shelter, so most of our library users will be very grateful for that. The one thing I do want to highlight as well is this section here, which is the corner of South and Broad, and this section right here. These are two planned public art installations, and I will talk about those in a minute, but the intention is that the first art installation here at the corner, which will be back set about 14 feet off of the corner of the street, is intended to be a gateway. The artist considers it a gateway as an entrance to the terrace. While you can access the terrace from any point along the sidewalk, this is going to be kind of our grand entrance point to the terrace. The artist will also be creating a secondary piece here that will be more of an educational and interpretive piece. I will talk about that in a minute. The terraces will be lit at night, and it will be lit in a way that both provides illumination for pathways and walking through the trees, but it will not interrupt the uplighting that we already have on the Rundle building. The designers were very cognizant of the fact that it is already a very dramatic backdrop to have the Rundle building backlit with our LEDs at night. So this will allow for nighttime use, but will not interrupt the full three-sided vision that we have for the LED lighting currently. And again, to show our connections to the river overall, there is a segment here that's called kind of a runnel path that provides a very, very gradual sloping to the edge of the cantilever deck. While that will not be filled with water, it is our intention to light this runnel to provide a pathway to share more of how the river is a component of this overall terrace. So again, many different aspects to the seating, the styling, the landscaping. I'll show some different images here for some perspective. It's hard to kind of imagine it from above. This image down below is if you were standing across on Broad Street near the convention center looking at the Rundle Library. Just have this image here to show the scale of the trees, to see that they will be substantial in size and will provide, again, really good shade cover for the afternoons, which in the summertime everyone knows if you were waiting for food trucks in the past or waiting to just gather with friends, it gets pretty hot. This image up here above is a rendering done by the architects that shows an example of how the deck will look if you were standing from the Blue Cross Arena, looking across the river to the deck and seating. Some of the brick and work underneath will be removed to show some of the examples of how the aqueduct and how the library is suspended. That is done intentionally, and it is done so that we're not removing a lot of what was put there previously was actually infill. It's not some of the original aqueduct masonry and stonework. So this just provides more perspective and will provide for natural light to come through for those portholes that we talked about during the daytime. Speaking of portholes, this is the example of the seating that I mentioned that has that approximately 4-foot window to allow you to look down below and see some of the prior examples of how the aqueduct and how the subway was constructed previously. And these two images here at the bottom are just examples of how the architects believe the finishes will look. They're just examples from other projects, that how the uplighting for the plantings would look, and those granite bands that I mentioned before to show how the subway passage goes through. So again, I mentioned the fact that we are going to have 2 public art installations, which is very exciting. During the process for the project, a $250,000 allocation was made by the city as during the budget for a public art installation. The library took the lead on a call for artists in this past spring, 2018. 63 artists submitted responses to this call, including local artists, national artists, and international artists. It was not a full request for proposals. The artists were encouraged to provide their letter of intent and interest and examples of their prior work. 4 finalists were selected to provide more detailed concept proposals for the site. And the reason that was done in that way was because we wanted the artists to continue to work with the design architects to actually create a piece and a site that is cohesive, that we didn't want to just put a platform out and have the artist do the installation after the fact. And we were able to, through the foundation, provide stipends to those 4 finalists so that they were compensated for their concept development. After a deliberative process, there was a unanimous decision by an arts selection committee that included library representatives, city representatives, and community and arts organization representatives. And the decision was to select Chavo Studios from Commerce City, Colorado. They've done other work in other public realms throughout the country, and just recently completed a project at the Grand Canyon for the National Park Service. These are some examples of Chavo Studios' work. They deal primarily in stone and metal, and they have been working with our architectural and landscape architectural firms for the last several months and have really been collaborating, and the design is actually reflective of their input overall for the project, which we're very pleased with. This is a better example, or more of a zoom in, if you will, on the gateway piece that I showed before that is on the corner of South and Broad. This piece will be about 16 to 18 feet in height, so it will be substantially sized, and it is meant to, again, be an archway to the entrance, if you will, of the terrace itself. The materials that will be used for the gateway is both stone and metal. This is the stone pillar that the artist intends to etch based on using different narratives of Rochester that they have been exploring through public and library feedback over the last several weeks and months. The 2 circular arches will be metal. They will also be able to be etched in a way that shows a narrative theme or diorama on Rochester's either history, background, showing different initiatives of the area and of the site's story specifically. We also will have 2 stone plinths that will be able to double as some additional seating for anyone who is waiting to meet someone at the entrance to the terrace. This image that shows nighttime is to show that the metal components of the installation will be illuminated. So they will have both a daytime view and also a different nighttime presence. And these are two examples of the artist's prior work that have been illuminated through metal with LED lighting, which is the intent. So we may also be able to control the color, similar to what we would do with the library right now. Because the artist really made a great concept recommendation, while the original project budget was $250,000 for an installation at the corner of South and Broad, the artist made a lot of really strong points about the need to draw people through the terrace, that the terrace itself should be an engaging prospect, that there should be pieces of engagement throughout the terrace. And what really struck us was the desire for the artist to take Rochester's story, especially the interest of the river, and how the river is really the source of the development for Rochester. Because of that, the Friends and Foundation have fundraised and continue to fundraise for a secondary installation by Shavo Studios that will really be an interactive feature. This is a stone slab that the artist will etch, demonstrating the impact of the river. While his design is not final yet, the intention is to show how the tributaries and different parts of the Genesee Valley feed into river and its impact on downtown. The feature itself will actually have activated water seasonally from May to November, so that students or families or any individuals who come to the space will be able to activate a bubbler that will have water then cascade through the piece and be recaptured at the basin of the slab. Our city historian's office is already working on public programming for our classrooms that come to the Central Library to talk about the history of the river in Genesee in a way that will utilize this space. So why rock the Riverway? A lot of people are asking questions about, why do this infusion of investment now? And I'm just going to show you a couple images that show at least why the library's perspective of why this is important. This is an example of Lansing, Michigan. Lansing did a very nominal investment in a portion of their downtown riverfront that had been previously industrial and is now a major civic gathering space. This is Columbus, Ohio, and this is what's called the Scioto Mile. I may be pronouncing it incorrectly, but I believe it's Scioto Mile. It's in total about 175 acres of parkland, but components of this, including this segment here in the picture, were developed. They were really a public-private partnership to develop an old abandoned section of a downtown circulator, like the Inner Loop, that was used now as a direct public park front, and it has both public art, pathways, walkways. It's a direct connection to the river. This is just one example of many cities that are now also working towards developing ways to engage their riverfront from prior abandoned either transportation initiatives, abandoned industrial initiatives. This is in Iowa, Sioux City, Iowa. None of these cities are very large. They're similar to Rochester, but they are all taking investments into their riverfront in an attempt to really catalyze both public and private investment, recognizing that the riverfront is something we've turned our backs on for many years and has the opportunity to really promote and be an economic development engine. This image is a sample from the Rock the Riverway presentation. It really shows the fact that investing in our downtown is already happening. These are some examples from the Genesee Brewery to the Metropolitan around the corner that have all happened in the last several years, some of which include public dollars, some of which do not, that are showing the transformation that is happening, and that really requires public connections between all of these investments to really create the density downtown that we are looking for. So I'll end with, how do we get involved in Rock the Riverway? A lot of people also assume, because the announcement was made by the governor's office, that all this stuff is just a done deal. And that even the library's project, that it is just complete and ready to go. And that is not entirely accurate. A lot of these projects are still in its early design concepts, which means there are going to be public meetings on a lot of these projects, specifically the projects related to the aqueduct and to the riverfront promenades that are coming up. These are all in the very basis of design, which means public input is still absolutely necessary. I would encourage you to continue to follow the city's website for Rock the Riverway, where there'll be announcements on these individual initiatives. I would also encourage you to use the city newspaper's events calendar. They've been doing an excellent job in promoting and providing all the public hearings related to design initiatives, and including the library's most recent initiative to get public input on the art project. I would emphasize that just because these ROC the Riverway initiatives are in place, it doesn't mean that the concepts themselves will become the final designs without public support. And using Columbus, Ohio as the example, when the Columbus, Ohio did its strategic planning process for downtown, the Scioto Mile, which we showed before, was just one of many initiatives, and it was actually number 12 on the city's recommendation. But during their public input process, public feedback on Scioto Mile was so strong that it moved the project from 12 to number 1 in the period of several months, and it attracted the private investment to allow it to happen from when the city initiated its strategic plan to 18 months later, shovels in the ground for these projects. So public input does have an impact on these projects, and absolutely, if you are interested and invested in any of these projects, I encourage you to continue to follow the city's initiatives and to participate in these design processes and public hearings. Overall, again, just I think that these projects are really a valuable investment for Rochester. I am seeing the change coming in and having been living in the city and working in the city for the last 13 years, and we should be really excited. For those of you who have lived in Rochester for a while, these are transformative projects, and I think it's going to be a really exciting time to be downtown. Whether you live downtown, work downtown, or just enjoy visiting downtown, you're going to see tangible changes in the coming months and years here. And that's what I had for right now.